So is it 50-50 if there's a no-deal Brexit?
Oh, I think the chances of... no, I think she will get a deal of some kind.
Right.
I think
a fudge or a proper deal?
A fudge. Well, if it's a fudge, it's still a deal. It's just a fudge deal.
But is it a fudge that actually means that she will no longer be Prime Minister because people like Boris Johnson will try and get her out?
Well, not immediately. She will come back with an agreement from Brussels. Yeah. It may be a very unsatisfactory agreement that has all kinds of problems and leaves a lot vague and all of that. The critical question, though, is what happens after that, because she doesn't have a parliamentary majority. And my view is that, at the moment, almost any deal that she brings back from Brussels will be rejected by the House of Commons. The only issue now is what happens when that takes place.
But she wouldn't take that risk, would she? I mean, the Prime Minister would try and get a deal that actually she can get through Parliament.
But her problem is that the differences in her party are irreconcilable. The difference between the Jacob Rees-Moggs and the Boris Johnsons, who want no participation in the customs union and the single market, and about 30 of her MPs, plus all of my side of politics, the Labour Party, who want to stay in the customs union and increasingly the single market, plus this big pressure from Ireland. I'm afraid that these are just irreconcilable elements. So it looks now, as of now, as the big question is what will happen if her deal is defeated. Now then, it could be...
What would happen? A second referendum?
I think it's likely there will be a second referendum, but there could be an election. But I'd be extremely surprised if in 6 months' time Theresa May is Prime Minister.
If there is a second referendum, what will be the position of Jeremy Corbyn on Europe?
Well, the Labour Party conference meets this weekend, and this is going to be the most important Labour Party conference in my time in politics. A very substantial proportion of the constituency Labour parties which make up the conference have already put down resolutions for the conference for a people's vote, a second referendum. Jeremy Corbyn will have to make a very substantial move to that. The very least he will do is to say it's on the table, which he hasn't said before, so that's a big step towards it. I think it's perfectly possible he might have to say that in the event of no other option being credible, including an election, which of course is what he prefers, so he can become Prime Minister, but if that isn't credible, then he would support a people's vote. Now, that will be a breakthrough, and that's what you need to watch for in the next 4 or 5 days, because if he says that, then the prospects of a people's vote have shot up.
But do you think he will become Prime Minister? I mean, he's had some pretty controversial positions, issues such as anti-Semitism, the Salisbury nerve agent attack. Do you not think that even moderate MPs should actually quit the party because of that?
Well, no, hardly any Labour MPs are going to be leaving the party at the moment because this Brexit issue is so important, and it's very unlikely that there'll be a general election in the time frame of Brexit, because Brexit will be decided one way or another by next summer. Maybe we have an extension of the negotiating period. No, it won't be as long as that. I think it's possible you could get an extension for a matter of months to allow either a negotiation to be completed or to allow a people's vote to take place. But we're talking about the difference between next Easter and next summer. I think it's extremely unlikely there'll be a general election before then, not least because the self-interest of the Conservative Party is very much against her. Remember, they had an election last year. She lost her majority. The idea that she's going to call another election so that she then hands the government over to Jeremy Corbyn, I don't think is likely at all. So the most likely thing in the next year, I think, is a treaty which she can't get through Parliament, which then leads to a political crisis. It's just conceivable the crisis could lead to a further negotiation, but I think it's much more likely to lead to a people's vote. But we're unlikely to have a general election.
But that means also it's heightened. I mean, the concern that actually then the UK crashes out is heightened if you have a political crisis.
Well, I think at the end of the day, Parliament won't allow the UK to crash out. All of these no-deal papers we've had in the last year have been frankly ludicrous, as if we're in the middle of the Second World War, stockpiling food, 6 weeks' supply of medicines, planes not taking off. There is no way that the British Parliament is going to allow that to happen. So it could be that there's a crisis. It may even be that she can't conclude a negotiation which precipitates a crisis. But in that extreme situation, which we could well face, my view is that Parliament will rise to its responsibilities, and the most likely course then will be a referendum where the option on the table is, of course, simply to stay in the European Union.
But do you think that actually the result of that second referendum would be different, and would it put the question to bed, or are people going to say, well, you can't just have a referendum just because you don't like the result?
Well, I think that the result of a second referendum in the next year will be a big majority to stay. I've been addressing meetings up and down the country in the last 6 months. The big new factor is that the young have been mobilised as never before. The young, by which I mean people under 30, 35, have been very bad at voting in recent elections, and they didn't vote in large numbers in the last referendum. They are really motivated by this because they see their whole future as at stake. You know, they may want to work, to live, to travel across Europe. I would expect in a people's vote that the turnout amongst under 35s will be as high as amongst over 60s, which has never happened in a British election or referendum in the past. If that happens, then I think there'll be a big majority to stay.